As entrepreneurs, we all want to make a difference. We want to create a movement. Well, I have a special treat for you today. This is an individual who has created a number of movements. He's a fellow serial entrepreneur. He is out there making a huge difference. He has raised a tremendous amount of money, over $100 million in his businesses. He's done a fair amount of that movement by using a medium that most of us aren't really using, video and film, and he's been shortlisted for the Academy Award. He has created a number of businesses, I'm going to let him tell you, that have been huge successes, and like many of us as fellow entrepreneurs, some pretty significant losses as well. But there's some big lessons learned, and you don't want to miss this. Jeff Hayes will be with us just in a second.
Ordinary success? No way. You want amazing, remarkable, exceptional breakthroughs. Dig deep, think bold, drive hard, watch yourself soar beyond your dreams. AESNation.com.
Jeff, I am so excited to have you here with us today. You are out there making a difference. I'm pretty aligned with you politically, so I've watched a lot of your movies, and I think you've got a lot of people who haven't been aligned. Hopefully you've moved along the way too. And so first of all, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. I'm really glad to be here.
Jeff, you know, it's as a serial entrepreneur, you've done a lot of things, and you know, we're going to talk about crowdfunding because you have been extremely successful beyond what most people have been in crowdfunding. It's, you know, a lot of times they've done one, they raise their hands and say, I'm now an expert. Well, you've used it serially, not only for yourself, but for your clients. But I think your business model is so unique. I want other successful entrepreneurs to know how you're using film and, you know, that whole process to really make a difference. But, you know, how did you get where you are today? I mean, you've got all these, you know, best-selling, remarkable movies under your belt and all these businesses. How did you get to where you are today?
So, necessity is the mother of invention. This is, it's funny. I'm a high school dropout. My sister's a PhD, a professor at a medical school for 25 years. And so we're at like the complete opposite ends of the spectrum. I was a door-to-door encyclopedia salesman when I was 18, and I was so ignorant, I thought that was a good job. And so I came up a direct sales route. And by the time I was in my early 20s, I was a siding salesman. And I had a partner named Red. And Red and I were driving, and we'd go out on appointments. And we're going in between Pampa and Dumas and Borger, Texas, these little tiny towns. And I told Red at one point, I go, you know, I want to have a desk. And I want to have to go to LA and New York, not Pampa and Dumas. Yeah. And I want to make movies. And Red says, you know, I want to be a pilot. And Red was also a high school dropout. We met when we were selling encyclopedias. And Red has now, I ended up buying an airplane later in my 20s, and he was my pilot. And Red would, for some reason, I had to go from a single engine to a twin engine. I kept having to, you know, I ended up in part owner.
Pilots are really good at encouraging you to move up. I don't know what it is, Jeff. Having been a pilot.
He needed the type ratings.
Yeah.
It had nothing to do with it. He was explaining how this was for my benefit.
Yeah.
He's just amassing these type ratings, but he ended up with a great airline career, and now works for Airbus, training pilots how to fly Airbuses. And I look back on these two country bumpkins riding in a Cadillac that neither one of us could afford, you know, selling siding door to door, trying to figure out, okay, how does life work? I'd literally see wealthy people, and I want to go knock on their door and go, okay, what'd you do? How'd you get here? And so that's the long, circuitous route that involves failure and learning and joy.
It's great, and you know, none of us get out of life unscarred. There's a lot of curves along the way, and you know, we all start at different places. But I mean, that's a great story, and it's I didn't expect. I knew yours turned out well. I didn't know. I wondered where you were going with Red. So it was great to hear Red did well as well. Jeff, one of the things that I've been so impressed watching, what you accomplish, and it's getting access to the capital, the production teams, creating great works that are getting publicly distributed and accepted. From a encyclopedia salesman, riding around in a rented Cadillac. I mean, this is huge. Tell us a little bit about the business model, because we're all starting to experiment. You and I are together here over a podcast. I'm using Skype to connect with you, me in Silicon Valley. You're, I think, in Salt Lake City area. And it's changed so dramatically over the years, and you just keep on seeming to make it work no matter what it is.
This is a spectacular time, because the deck's been shuffled, and the all of a sudden it's a new game, and even the biggest players at the table are having to figure out which end is up, and so. As I look at the quality of, we talked about your camera. I'm like, wow, that looks spectacular. And you're into that camera, $70. Holy cow. This is not the way it was. I hope to never.
I do have a $5,000 camera in the closet, though. I can get if I need it.
Me too. It's too big and too heavy. This. I don't ever want to sell another film to a studio. For the first time as a filmmaker, I can raise the money myself and spread the risk out by doing it with crowdfunding and bringing on donors and give up less equity. And then, the secret to being in the film business is if you have money, you can be in the film business. That, nobody is standing in line going, I can't wait to see the next Jeff Hayes film. The reason I get to be a filmmaker is because I know how to access capital. So it's just entrepreneurship. So I know how to make films. I have the contacts. I have the relationships. Now I have access to capital. And now the back end of this, film distribution is changing. And so the last film that I released is a controversial film called Bought. I've made it free online for 2 weeks. We gathered 350,000 likes on Facebook in 2 weeks. We built a list of 200,000 email subscribers in 2 weeks, we had hundreds of thousands of views. I had 100,000 views on YouTube from different illegal people, sticking it up there before we could take them down. And I can repeat that film. I can do that with that film 3 times a year for the next 5 years, gathering a couple of 100,000 names to my customer list every time I do it. So if you can imagine, the value of a list. What is a list of 600,000?
The way you and I know a lot of the online marketers. I can tell you what they tell me instantly. It's 10,000 for every 10,000 that you actually have a relationship with. It's $1 million of reoccurring revenue. And these are big business. Yeah, those are huge numbers, Jeff. And let's take it step by step through that business model, because the world has changed, and there's never been a better time to be an entrepreneur, because we can control so much. In the past we had to play with somebody else's platform, business, and so on, and kind of beg for access. And today, if you can get access to capital and access to fellow entrepreneurs, you can pretty much create anything. So let's take each of those steps. One of the things that you have become famous, and anybody Googling your name, you'll see a whole bunch of articles on crowdfunding. You have, I think, some of the most successful crowdfunded films on the major Kickstarter, Indiegogo, and some of the other platforms out there. How do you go about doing that, Jeff? Every entrepreneur wants to know, because you hit it their hot button right away. You don't want to give up, you're creating all this value. And what we tend to do is we tend to dilute by bringing in all these partners. And then not only is it the partner, the capital dilution, it's also our attention, our focus. We got to take care of all these people along the way.
Oh, you just brought back a memory. I had one company that we raised $25 million for all from individual investors. There was not an institution in the group. So this is just grinding it out. But the president of the company that I'd hired, Terry, her job, she literally had to talk to 40 people every week who wanted updates. And, we'd put together these group calls, and after the group call, 20 people would call in going, hey, I missed the call, so I thought I'd just call you. And literally she would spend 40 hours a week talking to investors who we had gotten their money 2 years before. There was no...
Jeff, I've been there, so I know that. And I know a lot of these fellow entrepreneurs are still answering those calls here because it's huge.
Crowdfunding, when all of a sudden you look at, you're not giving up your equity. There's a couple of key things you have to learn. And step one, you need to know there is no crowd. And for some reason, people go stupid and they think, all right, I'll put up my page and people will see it. And if I make a compelling case why they should support me, then everyone will spread it. And there's some bleeding hearts out there somewhere who will just send me money.
I think this is the biggest mistake I see of some friends that have done it, that there's this illusion that if you create the great video, great landing page on whatever service you use, people will come to your door. It's almost like a better mousetrap. And, it doesn't happen.
There's nobody that gets on it that's like going to their computer today on Kickstarter going, I've got excess cash. Wonder what I could get rid of by donating today on Kickstarter. And so once you get that, it's the same way as like you don't build a great page and say, now I'm going to put it on the web and traffic will show up. So the basics are the same as always. You got to have a page that converts. And so how do you make a page convert is you tell a story that's about them, not about you. So many times I'll see people and they know to start with the problem. So they start with their problem. And, so I have this problem. I want to be famous and I need you to...
I need only $10 million and it'll work.
You send me money. And so it's like, no. It's not your problem. It's the audience's problem that we're supposed to solve. So the basics of conversion, and then the basics of driving traffic to that. So you build a page that converts, so finding your tribe, finding who already cares about it. And the key for me in this is I don't make movies that I want to make. I make movies that other people want made. And so as opposed to a starry-eyed filmmaker, it's like there's this beautiful cactus in southern Utah that's one of the oldest living organisms on Earth. It's fascinating. It's going to make a great film. No, it won't. And so the key to movies that my tagline is movies that make movements, but it's not that, we do movements that need to be made. We find stories that there's an audience that wants them told, and I serve them and tell it for their reason. And then I give them a vehicle that they can get behind. And my success becomes a piggyback ride on somebody else getting what they want.
I always thought of that, Jeff, as you provide that accelerant to really get it going. There's a group you do. I mean, my impression of what you're doing is you're doing the crowdfunding also is a great way of testing it too, because you're going to get a measure of what kind of passion does this group have for that movement, that film.
If it doesn't, and if it fails there, then not to chase that. But more importantly, it's where I start to build my core list. So when we did the film Bought, there was several things. One is we did 4 campaigns for one movie. Nobody's ever done that before. They do a crowdfunding campaign for the movie and then move on. Well, I did another one, and then another one, and then another one, and the last one we raised more than we did in the second crowdfunding campaign. We were still over 100,000.
How did you segment each of the 4?
It's funny because we were making the film. At each time, I had something new to report. And so here's some of the footage we've shot. Here's some of the things. And so you've got new stories to tell. If you look at Pebble Watch, they raised 10 million in their first campaign, which is how I got interested in doing crowdfunding. I watched what they did, and literally 2 weeks after I saw that, I launched a Kickstarter campaign, and we raised 240,000 in the next 30 days. I'm like, okay, I'm in.
Yeah.
But they just went back and I think did 23 million on the Pebble Watch 2. So, and that is, by the way, a statistic that people who do a second campaign, uh, the success rate goes from 35% to 85%. So it's a skill. You're starting to build an audience. With Bought, I built a list of 8,000 people that when the movie was ready, now I have 8,000 affiliates, 8,000 people ready that have already voted with their wallet. Yes, I want to support this.
No, it's great. And why don't we, Jeff, how about in today's world, just, kind of, I don't want to go too deep in this, but, production wise, I mean, how has that changed and how is that accessible? I mean, we've got the capital raising certainly accessible by all entrepreneurs. In the past, it was such a mystery creating videos. I mean, it wasn't, I think 2005 or so, YouTube started. I mean, none of us thought about it. But now, more and more, access to working with people like yourself and others, putting together teams, entrepreneurs are doing that. How has that changed?
So there's both a good side and the flip side. So equipment now is unbelievable. So I'm shooting, films are being shot on 4K digital cameras and we're abandoning film altogether just from, that raw data. So you can buy, it used to be even a 16 millimeter camera was 350,000. Now all of a sudden, if you're spending 30 or 40,000 on a film camera, you can film Star Wars on the camera. I mean, literally, and they do. So there's like this is so and for documentary, if you're into a camera, like your Canons, these look so good it's scary. So that the access to that's the positive. The bad side is what separates something from is it filmic, is it theatrical, is lighting. It's some of the old guy skills that I still bring in people that where so people get very good at the front end, but they've never learned the basics. And the same thing, the basics of storytelling, the basics of now anybody who has a camera and whatever they shoot, we would in the past have called industrial video. They now call it a documentary.
Right.
And so this was very frustrating to me because I was getting frustrated with all this really low grade crap out there people calling documentary. My reaction to it was, well, that's what I get for swimming in the shallow end of the pool. If you're in the shallow end of the pool, there's going to be a bunch of kids. And so I decided I'm swimming out into the deep end of the pool. And so I'm doing scripted, theatrical, regular movies because I have the contacts and the skills to do it. I don't have to just only do documentaries.
That's great. And Jeff, you touched on just real quickly, distribution, because I think of how much things have changed. Think of books. It's changed so dramatically. I mean, you had to go through. I mean, I got a call the other day. One of my old publishers that I had sold 100,000 books, which was fairly good for a nonfiction, finance book. They're after me to write another one. And it's like, tell me why I would do it with you. I mean, just help me out. And, and I know they've heard that question before, but they couldn't answer it. There wasn't really any reason to go with them. It's self-published for, the type of audience that I'm looking for. But, you would, if you were going to do a feature film in the past, you had to go, to one of the big major players to have any chance of getting out. And then, at least as I understand, I worked in sports and entertainment for a little bit. It was pretty hard even then to do it. How about today?
So it really depends on the model that because I do movies that make movements, the film is rarely the thing that I need to monetize. I want the film to, to reach an objective for me. So like with Bought, what we, in a matter of 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks, we built a 200,000 name customer list that will take to 600,000. So that customer list was our goal. Now I could have gone other ways, people who would have distributed it for me, and they would have built a 600,000 name customer list. So literally, it was more effective for me to give the film away for free online and build that customer list than to sell it for a few dollars.
Well, and the reality is that customer list, whatever valuation it ultimately ends up being, these are people who are following you, who care about that campaign as well as you. I mean, boy, going forward, that is certainly valuable to invaluable to you.
For crowdfunding campaigns for people, and we segment that list based on what they're doing, and I'll do that with every film. So imagine if in your career, if you look back over all the businesses you've had, can you imagine if you had a list of every customer that your product ever went to?
No.
And you'd be like,
I would love to have that.
And so for me, that's going to be true from this point forward.
I think this is something all of us as entrepreneurs need to do. We've got to, the value of data today, the connections, the relationships are it's the foundation of business. And so often many creative types, and I count the entrepreneurs as creative types, have not really owned all the data of what they've created. And it's just, those relationships. And, with today, it's just so relatively inexpensive to keep all this and nurture it and build relationships for future.
Yeah, I have a friend that she wrote a book. She was wanting it to be a bestseller. She wasn't using Result Source or anybody to do that. She's just really trying to organically grow, and it's a wonderful book. She makes a couple of dollars per book every time she sells a book. She's pouring all that money back in plus everything else that she can do. She doesn't have any customers. This is a very difficult. So I was telling her about Jeff Walker's model, what he did with Launch, and that, with gave away a book for free, and with a one-click upsell, he was making $30 a book. So
let's stop just for a second. He's giving away a free book and making $30. And Jeff Walker is a good friend of both of us. You can Google Jeff Walker product launch formula in his book, The Launch. When it came out, it was a New York Times bestseller. And why don't you continue from there, Jeff?
Yeah, because of his brilliant plan that that he got that out there and got by giving it away for free and then having a one-click upsell and having the right products to follow it, he made it a very profitable campaign. So if he's got $30 to market his book and she's got $2, who's going to win in this? Who's going to be sitting on the New York Times bestseller list? Well, it's Jeff Walker. So I was basically explaining to her what an idiot she was. And as I was thinking about it, I had just released a film that was selling online for $4.95, and I made $2.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh no, I'm not talking to Judy. I'm talking to me. I'm the idiot here. And so the evolution of this business model was watching what people are successfully doing with books and realizing that I can do movement-related films on I'm doing some on entrepreneurship. My 2 categories are health and wealth. So alternative medicine and wealth issues. I can do films that people want done, that can spread, that can be the spearhead of movements. But then I can follow those and I can build a list out of them, and I can take that Jeff Walker and Dean Graziosi and all the people that have done that successful New York Times path and apply that to something where people will much more likely watch a film than they will read a book.
A lot of times it's called, self-funding or self-liquidating campaigns.
Yeah.
And we think, so many of us as entrepreneurs spend all our time building our list, but building our list for someone else. And we don't have it. If we can build those relationships, that's where it really takes off. And what I love about Jeff or Dean or anyone else, and I've done it as well because I've been hanging out with these guys. Jeff Walker and I've been I think one time we were joking, we were getting together 6 or 7 times a year through the different mastermind groups and things that we're doing. Just watching them do, raising this capital. I mean, it's a huge amount of capital that they have an unfair competitive advantage. And I want all our fellow entrepreneurs to have that unfair competitive advantage. There's no reason not to. And they're delivering real value to their audience, building deep relationships. But it's funding along the way where they create their own platform rather than count on somebody else like one of the big publishers in the book industry.
So it's funny. So there's a key political figure that I spent the weekend with at this in California this past weekend, and he has a book out on a controversial topic. And this is a guy who can pick up the phone and call Barack Obama, can pick up the phone and call Hillary Clinton. It doesn't matter. This topic is so radioactive, it doesn't help. The news media has really shut them down, and they have a documentary that they've been through, and so they brought me in to see could we help create a new campaign for them. And I just look at as they did their traditional thinking and what to do with their film and what to do with their book, they're absolutely doomed. And it doesn't have to be. I'm telling you, this is a spectacular time, and I really would encourage so what my point of telling that story is somebody could look at them and say, well, they're your competitor. But the reality is they're not my competitor at all. They make my market bigger as we train the audience. If people watching this, if you have an entrepreneurial film in you that stimulates the conversation, that you'll do a spectacular job with, get it out there. Do this. I will help, in any way I can. Every one of these voices, if it's done, if they do a good job, every one of them helps and just makes the market bigger.
It really does. And I mean, that's one of the things that the world has changed so much is that, we can compete, but we can cooperate like crazy and raise so much value. Jeff, as a fellow, you're talking to your fellow entrepreneurs, just what would be the one starting point if they're going to be doing something in film? You've had the privilege of working with an awful lot of people along the way and making a difference. What's the first step before they kind of stumble on this and thinking through a plan?
Well, and so to me, step one is who else wants this done other than you? So I mean, I've seen people literally spend millions of dollars on films that no one ever sees. And so the bad thing about the film business is people go stupid. They do things for ego reasons or reasons that have nothing to do. So I was trained by a guy named Sam Arkoff, who had Arkoff International Pictures. He did Beach Blanket Bingo, all those B movies of the 50s. He was the money behind Roger Corman. And, Sam was just a practical businessman. He said, if we were in the business of selling shoes, would we make shoes nobody wanted to buy? And so why would I make films that nobody wants to buy? So if you start with that premise, and then you set a quality standard, and even if you don't know film, when you have somebody show you their work, you can look at it and go, okay, that's theatrical. I don't know why. That's filmic. I don't know why, or it's not. And then, so you've got to just trust yourself to find somebody that's got that talent. And then is it story driven? Does it move people? Like I finished Bought in June. I screened it for a couple of people and I sat there and watched it, and it didn't have the heart. Mm-hmm. And I literally stopped, flew back to New York where my office and director is, and said, guys, we missed it. It doesn't have the heart. We ended up taking the middle of the film that was the most moving part, opening up with that. We had to shoot some new things. But then finally by October, it's like, okay, that has heart. I'm telling you, this skill everybody has. Trust your own opinions, but set of quality
Trust but verify with the
Yes,
marketplace.
that's exactly right.
You use a little Ronald Reagan here. Let me go to the next segment. This is the book of the book that you would recommend, Jeff, for your fellow entrepreneur.
So this is a different answer every month, and so this is one of the happiest things. I'm doing two things that I've now done for over a year that make me incredibly happy. One is I've started sending out thank you cards, and I've always meant to, and sometimes, but I finally printed some. I just looked down and saw one on my desk. I printed some, and it says, "I would sincerely like to apologize for my behavior on the evening of," and then there's a blank. And so a printed card for me apologizing for my behavior on the evening of, because I thought it was funny, I printed a ton of them. And because I think it's funny, I now send out way more thank you notes than I used to. So that's been the other thing that I started doing. I have a mentor named Lou Sportelli who is in his 70s, is brilliant. And I started getting books from him all the time. And I love that rule is you can never send out a book you haven't read. So I adopted his strategy, and I pick whatever book I've read in the last month that was the best book that I read that month. And I have a list of about 200 friends that I go through, and I pick 20 to 40 people that I think would benefit from that book, and I send that book out. My assistant puts a sticker on the front of it, tells the story of Lou Sportelli, and then I write a letter why this book was meaningful to me. And that may be the most fun thing I've done literally last year, of sending out books. When people get it, they know, hey, he thought of me. I'm important to him. It's been great for just letting people know. Just because I never call you doesn't mean I don't love you. It's like
It's great. It's great. It's one of those things that so many of us know that we should do but don't do, and
it's so easy. It's automated. So at some point in the month, I email my assistant, here's the book. I just walked in the office today, and there's, these stacks of books, and I know, okay, I got to write this email that tells. So to this month's book, it's always, what's my favorite interview? The one I just did. What's my favorite book? The book is called The Tools, and it's really a psychology book from a psychiatrist and a therapist who have spent the last 25 years working with people and narrowed down 5 tools that really do help people change when they're under stress, when times are tough. Forget all the talk therapy. These are 5 specific tools that you can use in stress and in your. And let me tell you, for entrepreneurs dealing with stress, I take big swings at the ball. And sometimes you'll see me at the plate spinning around, having not connected. It's ugly. And, learning to cope with stress so you don't manifest it in your body and end up losing your own health over trying to do good in the world. This is really important. So,
well, it sounds like a great book, Jeff, and even more, the process you're getting it out. I think it's one that all of us as entrepreneurs should do with our most important relationships to touch. Let me go to the next segment, which is the application of the day. Jeff, what would be an application on your smartphone that you would recommend to your fellow entrepreneurs?
So I'm hot right now on Asana. Asana it's on my smartphone. I have the app, but it's also on my computer. I use it for managing my task, but also for my team's tasks, so I can assign. And it's about getting rid of email. So we're all communicating on tasks and projects on Asana. It's free. It was developed for software development and people working with agile software development, and it's literally integrated itself into my life. It's one that works, and it has to be simple, or I don't get it.
I haven't used that, but I've had a couple of guys recommend it. I'm going to have to take a look at it because the project management, bringing together teams, is just so important, and it's a good way of reducing stress when it's working. Too.
Yes, and it's so it's not base camp. It's not but it's all my task and all my team task and all my projects and just really
Yeah,
functional.
we use Smart Sheets, which is another process like
Right?
that. And whatever you use, you've got to find one that your team really embraces. But let's go to the next segment, because I know everybody wants this, is resources. And Jeff, let me pull up your website here and put it up on the screen. And it's jeffhayesfilms.com. And all the links will be at AES Nation. Jeff, tell us a little bit about what they're going to find other than some beautiful film and going in the background. What's at the website you have?
So it's interesting. I'm separating out my brand, Jeff Hayes Films, from me, Jeff Hayes. And so I've got another website going up this week that's Jeff Hayes, where I list all my other projects.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm a serial entrepreneur, of course, I'm doing more than one thing. So the Jeff Hayes Films is a good place to start. It has the films I've done and the stuff that I'm working on, or some of the things I'm working on now. I'm doing on my personal site that will be linked to that later this week. We're building an app on gratitude that I can't wait for you to see, that automates and gratitude. We're also releasing a how to crowdfund course. And I'm doing that literally. I would rather give it away free than have to answer all the questions on, hey, do you mind? And it starts with, do you mind if I pick your brain?
Just for a minute.
Just for a minute. And it's like, hey, I just realized it'd be great if you helped me do a crowdfunding campaign. And I spent last year working for free for lots of people. And it's just a recipe for disaster for an entrepreneur, doing things that take all your time and make no money.
Very much so. Hey, Jeff, I mean, this has been great. Let me go to the last segment where I'm going to give the key takeaways. And I got a whole bunch of notes. And this is one of the interviews I'm going to recommend everybody go to aesnation.com, download the transcript. There's so many pearls of wisdom. Jeff has built a great business. Many of us would think it non-traditional, but he's just, I'm going to call it ahead of the curve. And he shared with us his own business model, how to do crowdfunding, how to really create movements, and to use these different tools so that we can go ahead and really accelerate our success dramatically. I mean, what the different ways of creating self-funding or self-liquidating campaigns, building an audience that's going to follow you to really make that difference. Excuse me. Jeff, I want to thank you again for taking your time, just that 1 minute to share with all our 10,000 fellow entrepreneurs. And I'm going to encourage everyone to go out, really download this. Everything's at aesnation.com, all the links, and go out and execute. Your clients, your future clients, they're counting on you. Don't let them down. We wish you the best of success.
Exceptional, remarkable breakthroughs. aesnation.com